Hey everybody, welcome back. Sorry about the delay in getting started on the podium. What was happening was I had to make sure that when you logged into remote access, which I feel like a lot of you will need to do for this podium portion of the class, I had to make sure that the podium was actually there. So I was working with IT to get that set up and also getting it on my computer because somewhere in the shuffle of COVID, it it was gone. So there are my excuses for you. So today I'm going to go over some basic settings and things like that, and just introduce you to Podium. And I'm not sure how many videos I'm going to sort of separate this up into. We'll see how it goes. But what I have here is an interior example that I'm going to go over. So an interior render we'll make together. And then I also have an exterior render that we'll make together. So these are just two models that I put together to sort of illustrate some of the oh basic settings of Podium to sort of get you started. Okay, I'm going to start with the interior, and the Podium toolbar is this guy right here. Now, ideally, when you log into remote access, you'll see it just like this. It'll just appear right there, and it's ready for you to use. If you don't see this, okay, so you come into SketchUp or you open my file, which I'll attach these to the lecture. You don't see anything, and you're like, what the heck do I do? What you want to go up to is View Toolbars and Podium V2.6 and Close. So this is the one we want. So there is the small chance that you might log in remote access and not see Podium at all. It's not in the toolbar list either. What I would do in that case is log off remote access and log back on, because once you log off and log back on, you're onto a different computer, and perhaps that one is ready to rock. I've checked it today and I didn't have any problems. So I saw everything that I would hope you see. Okay, so here's our toolbar. I'll keep it down here so we can kind of talk through it. So let me just give you the overview of all the buttons, and then we're going to go into specifically this one in depth in these kind of introduction videos. Here's what I think you're going to love about Podium is its ease of use. Their tagline, so they say, is they're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to get a good image. And when I say image, we're talking about photorealistic renders. And I think they do a pretty good job of that. I use a more powerful program for my renders, but that's just because I'm a tech nerd. This is more than adequate to produce high quality, beautiful renderings. It just depends on how much you get into it. One thing I do love about Podium is that it lives in SketchUp, meaning I don't have to leave SketchUp or export my model and go to a different program and mess around with that. That's fine and all, but this is nice too. Let me just close my window there. Okay, so right, so let's just talk through these buttons. So let me just tell you, the first button here is your render button. It just says you click that and the rendering will start. Okay, so let's just leave it at that, and you'll see plenty of examples as we move forward. The second button here is nothing that we're actually going to concern ourselves with. So I'm just going to ask you to ignore that one for the time being. We may come back to it here and there. Well, let me just press it, and right, it makes you save a current scene, but I wouldn't worry about this at all. This one right here is materials. So this will allow us to sort of give different materials, all the materials we have like over here in our materials palette that are currently in the model. We can give them different qualities like reflection, or we can make them glow, things like that. This button here is the options button for your render. So this is where you're going to do all the render settings, and this is what we're going to go through in depth. As we move forward, analyze model, we'll never use that, I guarantee. So I'm going to ask you really to ignore this one, generate current scene, and this one for the time being. This one, Podium browser, is an awesome tool where you can go in here, and I'll just show you this one real quick. Podium browser comes up, and we can sort of grab models, materials that are already set to go for renders and pop them into our model. So materials, different residential items, bathroom. If I go to home, let's see what comes up. I think I was on the home page, but let's see. Here's really where I usually go is I look in here for a category, vehicles or whatever the case may be that I can pop in my model. So you could go to any one of these, find something you need and put it in. And I use this for this initial model. I'll just close that. This last button is all about lights. So how you create omni lights, which are like point lights and spotlights. So lights are something in addition to material properties that really will make your models pop and make them look awesome. Okay. So just to review, this is our render button. This is what we hit to sort of get things going. Ignore. This is our material properties. This is where we'll go to set all the materials. This button here, options, is where we'll go to sort of set the render settings. This is if we want to add any other geometry to our model. Now, there really is the only difference between Podium Browser and, say, 3D Warehouse is Podium Browser might have lights and things built into the model. So they're just Podium render ready. So there might be a lamp or something, but it has a light already in it. So we don't have to do that. Or we could go to 3D Warehouse, get a lamp, but then we'd have to put the light in here anyway. And then here's the light system. So how we create lights. Okay, so let's sort of get started here. So here's what I have in this model. I have a very simple interior scene. All I've done is make 4 walls. I made some apertures here for windows, doors, whatever the case may be. And I also made like a sunroof opening in the roof there. I've got one scene for the model, and we'll go to that. So here it is, door, window, living room scene. I pulled this entire piece here directly from the Podium browser. You could have done the same with the 3D Warehouse. I mean, look at the detail in this stuff. Look at this glass. So if it's from the Podium browser, this glass will be ready to render and look good. Same with that there. But this stuff is really hard to model from scratch. Why not use models that are already built? I can make these my own. I can retexture things. I can do what I want, but I'll leave it at this. So here's my scene. This is the scene I'd like to render. Okay. I'd like to show my client this scene. I'd like to show them a really cool image. So how do I do that? So let's start with options. Okay. So this window here is really your best friend. You're always going to come back to this. Okay. So you're always going to be playing in here, changing something, rendering again, changing something, rendering again, changing something, rendering again. Okay. First things first are these presets here. So Podium comes with all these sort of presets, and it's basically information to help you. Well, how would I explain it? It's basically exterior, interior sort of render lighting presets. I'll show you the difference between some of these. But another really great tool to use is this compare presets. So if I click that, a web window will open here. It's going to show a render. So this is a bathroom render right here. Let me make this window a little bigger. This is just, don't really get hung up on these presets at the moment, but I just want to show you what's going on. So compare 2 presets right here. Preset 1, let's pick one of the presets, exterior default. You see how that changed very minimally. And let's go interior default here. Do you see how much brighter that is? So you can play with the slider, and it sort of just tells you what those presets do. Now, here's how I sort of go about it. To start, I just put it on default. Or if I know I'm in an interior shot, I'll do interior default. Okay. Or I'll do exterior default. And then once I like sort of tweak my render and get it moving, then I'll move to a different preset like exterior fine or high. I'm going to keep it on default for now, but I encourage you to look at the compare presets button and check things out. Okay, so first tab in here, there's really not that much to understand here, which is really, really helpful because the more complicated it is, the more no one will use it, right? So, output, image size, I could choose viewport, and that's basically the pixel size of my actual model window here. If you're doing viewport, it's going to be kind of small, okay, because it's just like whatever it is on your screen. I usually keep it on fixed. So I'll do something like fixed 640 by 480. This is the setting that I keep it on just to sort of test out the render, see how it looks, make sure everything's looking good. I can go in here and I can change whatever I want, or I can put it on custom and I can write in exactly the width I want and exactly the height I want. And we'll talk more about this when we go into image creation from Podium. So, like, how do we go from Podium to Photoshop to a finished, beautiful view? So, I'm just going to keep it at 640 by 480. That's my testing sort of render um, image size. Image format, I can choose PNG, and with PNG, I can choose transparent. What's kind of nice about this is that things in the background, like here, where I'm looking off into open model space, like there's nothing back here, right? It's just infinite space. This will come out as transparent so that I could slide in my own background behind this image in Photoshop. So that's really handy. JPEG's also a good one, but this will come out just white, but it'll be part of the image. So what I like to do is just keep it on PNG and transparent, and then I'll show you further what this does and how we can work with it. Image save location. So this is really important. So this particular model is saved under a folder I have called Podium. So let me get rid of this model. I have our two example files in here. And so whenever I render something, it's going to drop it off right here. Now, I could say custom and I could browse my own location. Like I could have made a folder in there called images and it could be saved into there. And I could select that. But for now, I'll just keep it at model. Okay, so that's basically the settings here. HDR, I should say, is just another high quality image that just gives you more control. But in our world, we'll just live sort of in these two initial settings. Okay, so that's good for output for now. I'm just going to leave all those settings. Now let's go to environment. Okay, so for background, we have a couple options. One is default set in SketchUp, and that's what we're going to start with. So whatever background I have in SketchUp is what I'm going to see in the render. In this case, it's just plain white, whatever, the infinite 3D space. Podium comes with two physical skies that I will show you that we can put back there or turn on rather. And it also comes with an HDRI. And once that is selected here, we can select different HDRIs here. But let's hold off on that. And let's just keep it to default for now. The sun sky brightness, I'm going to reset to 50/50. That's where it normally resides. So once we see our image, I could say, oh, I want that sun and sky more intense or less intense. I want the exposure more or less. And I can always hit reset to bring it back to 50/50. Rendering mode, you have slow and fast. Why would you ever do slow? I don't know. I mean, just keep it on fast. That's all I would say. Um, just a couple things about options. I'm going to leave all of these unchecked for the moment. But just to let you know of a couple things, soft omni lights, this means that your shadows will be nice and soft. They won't be like a crisp edge. And clay rendering, this is so like if I clicked clay here and hit render, all my materials in here would be ignored and just be like sort of a white clay. And we'll do one of those just to show you what it looks like. But for now, I'm just going to keep those unchecked. And then I'm going to hit save. Okay, important to hit save. All right, so I've made the render settings I want. I'm not too concerned with any material properties or lights at the moment. Let's just get this environment set up. And what I mean by that is the sun in a way is not on yet. I'm just concerning myself with the sky and the ambient light that it creates. That's essentially what we did right here. We set all this up. Okay, so we're just saying, hey, sky, do this. Okay, now I'm going to hit render right here. When I hit render, this little Podium rendering manager opens. So this rendering already finished. See, it just is done. I can click on that guy and I can double click on it, or I can hit show. I'll just double click. Okay, so this is our rendering. Notice I'm not seeing like any intense like sunlight coming in yet. So this is just sunlight is off. It's just the sky that's lit up, that's lighting our scene. So we're sort of seeing what, say, an overcast day would look like. Okay. You are seeing some material properties here. So this is my floor. I have a wood floor in here, and I do have some reflection going on in there. You see it here. Now I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. I lost my Podium toolbar. Oh, there it is. And I'm just going to turn that material property off. Just sort of ignore what I'm doing, and we'll talk about this material stuff later. So let me hit render again. There's my, I can click on it right away, even while it's still rendering. Now you see I don't get that reflection down there. So now it's sort of a little bland, but that's okay. A little flatter than you saw with the reflection, but that looks actually like pretty good. You can see it's not exactly my screen here because I don't have any space over here, but the ambient lighting is actually pretty decent. So here, I just want to show you now. I have my rendering manager open. Let me go to the file, the folder where the file's saved, and you can see that I have, I've got the two. I can delete this. This is just the backup file for SketchUp. But here are the two renders I just made. So they're saved right in here. Okay, I'll leave them in here for now. But it's good to kind of remember where they go. Okay, don't forget. Okay. Ignore this. This is something that's happening on my computer, and I don't know why. So I just hit cancel, and then it sort of just sticks around for a while. Okay. So here's my Podium Render Manager. There's that one in there. I can hit cleanup and it can go away, but that file is still saved where I showed you. Okay. So let's go to our settings and let's go to the environment, and let's just do, instead of default preset, let's do interior default. Hit save and hit render. Okay, let's see what that does. Go to my render manager. I'm going to double click on it. So it's still rendering. That's why it looks the way it does. Okay, to me that looks a little better. So interior default sort of changed it up a little. If I didn't hit cleanup before, I could have gone back to that other image just to see what the difference was. But that actually looks pretty good. I like the intensity of the light over here, and I like how it gets darker over here. Let's minimize that. I'm gonna go back to my settings. Let me just change. Let's try this at viewport once, and let's just see our image here. So I hit render again. Here it is right here on the list coming up. I can double click on it and it's sort of rendering through. So it almost looks like the same size. So it looks like viewport didn't really change much. But the point being is I dig how this looks. This looks pretty good. Now let's turn on our sunlight. Okay. Because I want to see some intense sort of like sunbeams coming in here. So the way we do that in Podium is pretty simple. We just turn on our shadows. Okay, so now I see sunlight coming in. Okay, and I can sort of move the sun around using my time and date. Now, keep in mind, the light will be different if it's sort of morning, middle of the day, and evening. So something to keep in mind. This light and dark setting in your shadows has no effect on anything in Podium. So don't think you're making the light less or something by putting this down or anything like that. Okay, so I just turned them on. I'm not going to do anything else. I have the ambient set already. I'm just going to hit render. Let's see what we get. So I'll go to my render manager and I'm going to double click that rendering that's happening and take a look. Now, one thing I might want to do is, so now I'm seeing like it looks pretty intense with the sun on, especially over here. It's kind of burned out. Ambient looked pretty good, but now it's like, geez, this is like way too much. Okay, so let's go back to our settings and back to environment. And now I'm going to just take down the intensity and the exposure down to 17. I'm just picking that number, but I'm just kind of want to do halfway down. I'm going to hit save and hit render. And take a look at our rendering here. All right, already looking a little better. I feel like it's not as intense. Still pretty intense over here though, right? Let's take it down just a step further. So you can see how many times I got to kind of minimize these, kind of go back and forth, but that is so typical with rendering. Let's see. Let's do 0 and see what happens. Why not? All right, I'll hit render. Okay, I can always let me close my old. So this one's rendering. This is the one we just did right here. Here's the one we did before it. Okay, so not that much of a difference. I'm seeing some definition in the corner, but burned out here, but not that much. Now let's check the new one. Okay, a little more. So here's something I've learned is that let me put these off. When you go into settings, this intensity is sort of minute control. It's not as what's the word? It's not going to give you that much of an effect. Now we might want to do a different interior one, but I think our better bet would be to change the background because right now it's default in SketchUp. We have this like white background that could be affecting that intensity of light coming in. So let's just pick Podium Sky 1, Physical Sky 1. I'll hit save. My intensity and everything is still at 0, but let's just see the effect that it does. Okay, I'm going to rendering here. So since I closed this, I think it just cleaned this up automatically, but let's take a look. I think we're going to get a better image here. Yeah, we're already getting a better image. Now I might want to even bump up the intensity a little bit. Let's go back to there and there. And let's do, I'm going to reset the intensity just to 50-50, hit save, hit render. Let's see what we get. Okay, maybe burned out, but yeah, it looks like we kind of went back to burned out. So it might be better to put those back down to 0 or close to 0. So this is the joy of rendering. It's kind of like a trial and error, like you just have to, you know, start nerding out on it, as I always say. Let's do one more render, and then I'll sort of wrap up this video of the interior, and I'll make another one for the exterior, which is going to sort of follow similar techniques. I think this one looks good. Yeah, I like how that looks. So you can see that where our sun shines in, it's pretty like intense. Now, keep in mind too, is ideally you would have other things modeled out here that we would see, like a ground plane, some trees, um, um, other things. I don't know, whatever's out there. In this case, it's just the world, the three-dimensional world of SketchUp. Let me just switch this to Physical Sky 2 so you can see like the difference here. And let's see. Rendering. So it might be like some tonal quality difference. Now I can see a different sort of gradient out there. That looks pretty nice too. I mean, this all looks real nice over here. All right. So let me sort of show you one more thing and then we'll get out of here. Let me go to my environment. I'm going to check. Well, let's try doing. I'm going to just check soft Omni lights for the time being. And I just want to see this is going to produce an effect on those shadows. I close the rest of these images so I don't get confused. I was just curious if we can get a softer. Let's see. Yeah, they're more or less the same. Yeah. I believe this, the setting I just changed is really only for when we have a light source in there that's making shadows. Okay. So let's say we are happy with that render. We're happy with that test render. It looks good. We're ready to sort of make a bigger image. So in order to make something of reasonable size, I definitely want to do some kind of custom width, or I can pick one of these like that one. Maybe this one. Now keep in mind, I would say anything above like 2000, at least in one dimension pixels, would be a good size to work with. But this looks pretty good. Before I do that, I might want to go to my Podium and delete all those renders we just made, because we kind of use this as sort of trial and error to figure things out. I'll delete those and I'll just make this one render here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And then I'll render it. Now let's see how long this takes. Now we've gone up in size considerably, and it should take definitely twice as long. But look at it go here. So it's definitely slower. Now you can imagine once you get materials in here, reflections, all kinds of things, this is going to be it's going to take a while to produce a good rendering. It's using all of your computer power to sort of calculate this. But still, for the rendering of a 2000 some pixels across, I can already see it coming to life. It's almost done. Yeah, that looks real nice. I mean, especially the glow over here that I'm getting from this skylight. It's kind of like the light coming in is bouncing off some of that blue, and I'm seeing some of that. So we'll sort of let this go through, and then I just want to open it in Photoshop to sort of show you this file. There we go. That took a minute. I mean, that was nothing, and that looks like a reasonable render. Now I'm going to go to Photoshop here, and I'm going to go ahead and open that file. My Podium. Okay, here it is. Now remember, I had transparent click, so I can actually see beyond this layer. And I could put something back there like a cityscape or whatever the case may be of whatever my rendering calls for. And I don't have to go in and cut all that stuff out. So that's really nice. So here's our render in Photoshop. And if I go up to image size, I can see that it's exactly the pixels that I sent. So this is 2000 pixels across, which is really nice. It gets a little tight over here, but we'll work on how do you actually set the pixels to be exactly what we want as we move forward. But here's a great background to sort of start a rendering. So here's a interior example for you. And now I can go into any post-production I want to do in here. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to make another video for the exterior, but go ahead and you can use this file that I'll include to sort of do everything I just did and give it a whirl. But I think you're going to have to use the remote access. You may want to look into downloading Podium for yourself. I'm sure there's like a 30-day trial that you could play around with, which almost takes us to the end of the semester. So something to consider. All right. Thanks, guys.